Well, hello, Dr.
Okay.
Dan Kaufman. Thanks for coming today on the Regen podcast with UC San Diego Sanford Stem Cell Institute.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today.
Absolutely. Excited to have you as one of the directors of our centers, the Advanced Therapy Center. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you came to be at UC San Diego.
Sure, just in terms of a little bit of background. So I've been here at UC San Diego for about 9.5 years now, and was professor faculty at University of Minnesota for 14 years
Aha.
before that, which is actually my hometown. Most people know I'm native Minnesotan and may hear some of that.
San
Um,
Diego tends to do that to people, get you out of the
get
Midwest.
out here. It only took 50 years for me to get out here to California. But so I have a few roles here. So mostly I run my research lab, which I've been doing for almost 25 years now. And we'll talk about that on
Yeah.
making iPS-derived cell therapies. And then since coming here, I oversee and direct our advanced cell therapy laboratory, part of the Advanced Therapy Center, as you mentioned, which is really our what's called a GMP facility. It's for making cell therapies suitable for clinical trials, clinical products. And then I still do clinical work in hematology, BMT, and cell therapy. So I attend in the hospital from time to time as well.
So you wear a lot of hats here at UC San Diego.
Exactly.
Well, that's great. Well, we're lucky to have you as part of the Sanford Stem Cell Institute. Take a bit of a dive deeper. Give us a high-level overview of the Advanced Therapy Center and the and ACTL, the lab that's
Yeah.
part of the center.
Right. So it's really started with the ACTL, the laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
So this was established about 8 years ago or so, and was really in the process of being developed when I came here, based on some philanthropy and support from the Cancer Center, where there's a group wanting to do some novel cell therapies, a product called tumor infiltrating lymphocytes. But again, when I came here, one of my goals was to build sort of a broader cell therapy program, and so really worked with the vice chancellor at the time to establish this as an independent program, not
Mm-hmm.
part of a separate department, which it was at the time, and with a broader goal, not to just focus on this one therapy, but to have a broader range of therapies that can be developed both from internal UCSD investigators as well as work with biotechs, especially those in the area that might have need for
Mm-hmm.
this type of specialized facility. And so this is a specialized kind of laboratory where everything is basically very clean. So it has to have certain standards, as you know, you might see people in bunny suits and things like that when they manipulate the cells and so on, because there are these FDA standards
Sure.
for suitability. And so that's been running with, it's regulated by the state of California health department. And so we've had our manufacturing license. We actually just got it renewed for the third time. So for, about six, I think each one is for 3 years. So we've been going for about 6 years, and again, have done a number of products to help translate these into the clinic.
Sure. So I'm glad you mentioned our clinic. We have an alpha stem cell clinic here as part of CIRM,
Yeah.
California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Obviously, we know why it's advantageous for industry to be pivoted here and poised here in this innovation hub that we have in San Diego for biotech and pharma and those things. But tell us a little bit about how it's unique to UC San Diego and why it's advantageous for us to have this all in-house and kind of be an end-to-end service.
Yeah, I think the more you can have these pathways integrated can be, helpful, again, for both internal
Mm-hmm.
and external investigators. And, I think most institutions, I'll say sort of at this level, you know, have these type of facilities, but maybe in different parts, right? The cancer
Right.
center may have part, the pathology or somebody else may have another part. And so, here it is, more integrated. And again, we can work on trials that come in through the Alpha Clinic,
Hmm.
work with the same clients to get their cells and to get those to patients. And so hopefully for the clients, so to speak, it's a little more efficient. We still, again, do work with other departments where we're doing the trials, right? So there might be investigators in the cancer center who work with us, investigators in other areas. We're doing a lot of trials for neurologic disease. So
Hmm.
we work with the neurosurgeons there, and the Alpha Clinic is really kind of able to put those parts together, I think.
Absolutely. What's it like to be a part of this? I don't want to call it a machine, but this really, I think of it as an innovative setup for an academic institution that has this, bench to bedside, sometimes to orbit to bedside, um, and being able to be a one-stop shop for companies, but also for clinical trials, and ultimately making a difference in patients' lives in almost real time here.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really about how you're able to be innovative, both on the research side, the lab research, as well as on the clinical side, right? And to be able to, have other investigators here who are really
Hmm.
doing, cutting edge work, again, whether it's making, neuronal cells from pluripotent stem cells or making different immune cell products or such, but then to also, connect to investigators and companies that are doing the clinical trials, and to be able to offer our patients, what are really, again, the newest uh, clinical research, right, where there may not be an accepted therapy,
Hmm.
but, as you may have talked about, for example, we're doing trials of a product, a neurological product for treatment of epilepsy, right? And so
Hmm.
this has been at very early stages. It's not my area in particular, but it's been really interesting to see that, this is going on, and it's been able to be really effective. And I think in the early trials, and again, as a physician scientist, to kind of see those um, first in human trials going on
Hmm.
is really kind of where you want to be.
Yeah. And you are unique. You are a physician and scientist, so you've been on both sides of the fence, and you continue to do all of the above. You wear lots of hats, like we said. Um, what is it for you that is your specific area? You mentioned
Yeah.
that epilepsy is not your area, but
No.
what is your area, and how did you settle on that in your career?
Right. So clinically, I'm a hematologist, so I'm
Ah.
trained in hematology, and something different for me. So most people who go through, you go through medical school and then internal medicine training, and then most fellowships are a combined hematology oncology fellowship, and people do probably more of the oncology. At the time I did my fellowship, it was just hematology. So I always say I'm
Hmm.
a hematologist, not an oncologist, but treat a lot of cancer patients, blood cell cancers. Um, and so my own research, again, from when I was postdoctoral fellow, so that's where I really got involved in the stem cell research, working with Jamie Thompson at the University of Wisconsin, who was the first to derive human embryonic stem cells.
Ah.
And
Okay.
this was in the late 90s, if people still know the
Sure.
history of the stem cell field. Again, I was doing my residency. I was going to be doing my fellowship at University of Wisconsin. I always tell people I was in the right place at the right time and was able to join his group. And really, we are the first ones to make blood cells from the human ES cells, which, again, being a hematologist, I was interested in hematopoiesis or blood cell development. My PhD work had been in immunology. This was, related, but a little bit different direction. Then I, again, became faculty at University of Minnesota, and again, with my background in immunology, I wanted to see if I could make immune cells
Hmm.
from these pluripotent stem cells. And the first one we tried, which wound up working really well, is a population of immune cells called natural killer cells, or NK cells. So these are part of your immune system. They kill tumor cells. They kill virally infected cells. There are other investigators at University of Minnesota, mostly my colleague Jeff Miller there, who really pioneered a lot of the clinical translation of NK cell-based therapies, not from pluripotent stem cells at the time, but from donors. So you could get related donors, and through trials there found that these had pretty good activity for treating cancers, especially certain types of leukemia called AML. And so we were able to make essentially the same type of cells in the lab. And then we wanted to improve on that. And really what we've continued to do for the last, 15 or so years is use these pluripotent stem cells, first the human ES cells and now iPS cells, which most people are familiar with. These, again, are cells that can make all the cells and tissues in the body. We can make these NK cells, but we can use the pluripotent stem cells as a platform to make genetic modifications to make better NK cells. I used, when I was first coming here, and I gave a talk at the Cancer Center, and I talked about making super NK cells. And so Scott Lipman, who was Cancer Center director at the time, would keep asking me, when are you going to have those super NK cells? So we did do that. We could add molecules called CARs, or chimeric antigen receptors, other enhancements, and some of that IP, those enhancements have been licensed to companies. I used to collaborate with a company called Fate Therapeutics, which is here in town. And they put this, we collaborated because I was working on iPS NK cells. They were working on iPS NK cells. But they took this work from my group, put it in the cells, and those have been used in a number of clinical trials that they've done. So that's been, essentially our main focus. We've come up with other gene edits that we kind of continue to work on to make them better targeted for certain types of tumors, other advantages. So that's been kind of our main direction. We've gotten into some other new areas that we can talk about as well if there's interest.
Oh, absolutely. What's it like to be a researcher, but also practicing medical professional, to know that theoretical research that you've done in the laboratory has actually translated to applicable, translatable therapeutics for people?
Yeah, it's, of course, really gratifying to see things move from the lab into the clinic. I'll say that was not, necessarily the intent of, where I saw things going when I, started this, 30 plus years ago. I was interested in the science. I like the clinical work. I often tell people I did a combined MD PhD program because I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to do, clinical work or research. 30 years later, I still haven't made up my mind. I still do both.
Overachiever.
But it used to be, I'll say, much more common. I hate to say, at the tail end of physician scientists. There are still MD PhD programs, but it's getting harder for clinical departments especially to support lab-based investigators who still do clinical work. Again, when I started, it was much more routine. Much of the research seems to have become much more clinically focused. But of course, you still have to have the research in the lab to have those novel products to put into the clinic. But it's a little bit more people doing one or the other. There are still plenty of physician scientists who do both, but it's getting more challenging. I'll say even before the current year, that may have limits on NIH funding and things like that, but it's getting ever more challenging.
Yeah, I hear that. You talked about that there were some other areas that some of this work has touched that you haven't mentioned yet. Tell us about that.
We've gotten into a new area in my lab in the last 3 or 4 years because, I'm, my expertise and interest has been in cell therapy, and it's been a promising area. There's still challenges, and it's complicated to make those cells. It's expensive to make them. So I started a new area of what's called in vivo cell engineering. So instead of the idea of taking cells in the lab, either from patients or making them from our pluripotent stem cells, engineering them, given to the patients, the question I is, could we develop novel genetic vectors that would target the patient's own immune cells to express these chimeric antigen receptors, CARs, or other molecules to directly engineer the patient's own cells within their body to kill tumor cells? And of course, nothing is really an original idea. I had this without really knowing that there were starting to gain interest, this again 3 or 4 years ago, of groups, I'll say, with similar ideas. And there's at least a handful of companies that are doing work in this area, and have even just probably in the last, I think, not even year, some clinical trials have started on this. But we've developed some novel, what we call genetic vectors. These are modified viruses that we think can improve on what's going on, clinically now. Still a little bit of time to develop.
Sure.
But the speed of, one of my interests is the speed of developing this is much faster. And one of my goals, our ACTL, our GMP facility, can only support cell therapy development. I'd be interested, we'd have to have separate space to make genetic vectors. There are other groups that do this in a GMP facility. Be nice to do it all under one roof, because it does become a more efficient way of getting things to the clinic. So that's our new area. We're not quite to the clinic yet, but I think it's gotten a lot of interest.
It sounds like you're setting a good foundation for that, for the next steps.
Trying to,
Absolutely.
Gotta move into new things.
And so with that strong foundation, you've already talked about some of what you're passionate about and what is exciting about what's on the horizon, what's in the future. What are some other ideas that you have, or other things that may be coming down the pike without necessarily giving away that secret sauce?
Well, I think, again, there's a number of projects, both internal to UCSD as well as potential external partners. We continue to interact with different clients with different cell therapy products. Hopefully we can get more of those here. We are a little constrained because our facility is a relatively small, again, 2-room GMP facility. So again, really the goal for the future, I think, is to see if we can establish a bigger facility. Of course, expansions are, again, sort of challenging in this environment, but I think there's the need and the future prospects that would support that. We also work, there's a broader, you mentioned CIRM, the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, has now what they call their cell and gene therapy biomanufacturing network, which we are part of. There's actually 9 academic GMP programs in California that they support. We work together to some degree. I think, there's the potential to interact more.
Always.
We would like to bring more products. So, example, there's investigators here who do engineering of what are called hematopoietic stem cells, or HSCs. But they were doing that work before ACTL was even started. So they're working with other groups up at UCLA and so on. We would, again, like to be able to do those type of projects all in-house, but it's just a matter of developing the expertise and having the technology that's needed for those type of new products. So we're working also with some vendors. I won't announce here, but
That's
we just
fair.
signed a partnership, I'll say, with a local large sort of bio research supplier who has a lot of novel equipment. So we'll actually be able to have some novel equipment actually for a year here. We can even set up a core facility to allow access for other investigators. And I think a lot of it is getting the word out that we have this facility, and we continue to want to interact with new clients, but to find other ways to engage with again, both academic and biotech investigators.
Yeah. You've touched on it a little bit, but let's dive deeper. Why is science important, especially in today's climate?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of unfortunate anti-science kind of pushback
Yeah.
for one reason or another. But the clinical advances continue, and I think maybe it's hard for people sometimes to put two and two together to get better treatments in the clinic, because while there's been a lot of great advances, we can treat, again, my area, cancer better than we ever have before, and survival for a number of malignancies continues to improve. We're not there yet, right? And the only way that treatments get better, patients live better lives, survive longer, is through continued research advancements, right? And it comes from, again, my bias is academic labs like this, us at UCSD and other groups here. There's a whole biotech industry that's in this area as well. But, again, people may or may not know that a lot of the technology that's done by biotech starts with academic investigators first. So as I mentioned, I've licensed work to companies. I've had my own startup, and I may just be dumb enough to do another startup based on our gene therapy work. So, it is that sort of translation from the basic science to the clinical work that continues to be needed.
Yeah. You also have a lab here at UC San Diego beyond the Advanced Therapy Center, the Kaufman lab, right?
Yes.
So what type of work is the Kaufman lab doing that either dovetails or is in addition to the Advanced Therapy Center?
Well, it's really my main research lab that's done most of the work that I talked about. So the iPSNK cells is in my research lab. The genetic vector work is in my research lab. And then we are, for example, for the gene vector work for the in vivo cell editing, we are now starting to work with the Advanced Therapy Center to translate this to do what's called process development, which is to move it from a research lab to GMP kind of scale and conditions. So because instead of making these viruses in small dishes, we want to make them in bigger batches and to be able to purify that and so on. So that's kind of going from the basic to the translational or process development work. So my lab personally, we're trying to sync up more. And again, we do other work with other investigators on campus, as I mentioned, for example, with the human ES-derived neural cells, right? So we've been working to make those cells under GMP conditions. It involves certain assay development so you can understand, what cells you have and how they're characterized, not just to the standards of a research lab, but to the standards of what the FDA needs and expects, which is a little bit different and can take some time. So,
Absolutely.
Again, working with groups for this area process development through the Sanford Advanced Therapy Center is kind of what we're trying to get going more, to do more of.
That's wonderful. It's really unique and advantageous, I think, to be part of an academic institution like UC San Diego and UC San Diego Health and the whole health system that makes it intentionally interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary. So it's not just one specific focus of intervention or therapy, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously UCSD is a huge academic program, right?
Yeah.
I only know life in academics, as I've said. I've been, I've worked with startups, done my own. It's a different culture, and I think UCSD faculty professors, as any field, you can pick the direction that you want, right? There are maybe some faculty who just want to stay in the lab, study a specific molecule, a specific cell, specific organism. That's fine, and you can go into as much depth as you need or want there. There are other faculty, as you say, who are more cross-disciplinary and can take maybe not as much depth, but more breadth in what's going on, which is obviously a little bit more where I fit. Maybe I have a little short attention span, but I like working in these different areas. And as mentioned, even though I don't do neurologic research, knowing these trials are going on, or autoimmune disease or cardiac disease, I know a little bit about these things. So seeing and
Yeah.
helping to advance a variety of projects is really interesting to me.
That's great. What keeps you passionate? What keeps your interest? Why do you do the work that you do?
Maybe I don't know any better. I mean, it is kind of, again, what I've done. I like getting back to it, I like the science. I like the data. I like being able to make stuff, or I don't get to play in the lab anymore, but I have students and postdocs and other trainees who I get to work with in the lab, hopefully help advance their career and so on, to be successful and to, help to develop new science, potentially new therapies. I think people are interested in that. So again, it's just kind of where I've been trying to do something new, and always trying to innovate in some ways, I guess, is what keeps me interested in this.
Yeah, it's interesting where life takes us and where we find our niche. Sounds like you found it.
Yeah, I've as I said, I've been doing this to me forever. And I've had a research lab now for about 25 years, and I've kept it continuously supported, which is its own challenge. So it's writing grants and reviewing grants, and you interact with a lot of other interesting people. So people find their path, and I've been able to make a pretty good go of it.
That's great. You mentioned postdocs and trainees. What advice would you give to folks at that level, if not even before that level, even high schoolers that are thinking maybe science is exciting, but oh gosh, it's a lot of math, or it's a lot of STEM related stuff, right? And maybe they feel intimidated by it. What advice would you give to them?
I think there's a couple key things. I mean, if you're, even if you're a high school student, college student, whatever, the first thing that I advise people and look for is to be curious, right? You want to know more about it. About some topic, right? Don't just be satisfied with what somebody else tells you. Now it's unfortunately getting easier and easier with the AI things. You can just spout in searches and they're going to give you a lot of information.
Yeah.
But if you're curious and you want to get to a deeper level, and then learn how to find things out for yourself, if you read I want to say textbook, I don't think we have textbooks anymore, but you read something online about some, say, neuron that's treating epilepsy. Well, how did they figure that out, right? And how do you know that? And if you're curious and that makes you interested in the science, that's important. And then maybe a little less popular advice is to work hard. And I think, and I'm sorry to say it does take a lot of time,
don't be
both
sorry.
studying and time in the lab. And, if you're, again, curious and you're passionate about what you're doing, you got to put in the time to do it. And I'm going to say it's less popular to say what I'm going to say, but if you're working 40 hours in the lab, but somebody else down the block or across the country is working 60 or 80 hours, unless you think you're twice as smart as they are, which you're probably not, you may not advance as much as them. If you're interested in what you're doing and you can put in the time, you can do some really cool things.
Yeah, that's great advice. A lot of people don't think about that, and it does take work. It does take dedication.
It does. There's no substitute for it.
Yeah, absolutely. What has probably been one of the most exciting opportunities that you've had throughout your career that you look back on and you're like, wow, I didn't even think that was something that would happen, without giving away any, secret patient data or something?
No, there's no secret. And I don't know that it's one event that I can think of as a highlight, but I think the ability to, I'm going to just say, travel. I've traveled literally all over the world. For scientific meetings, to be invited to scientific meetings, people that are, I'll say I'm fortunate enough that people are actually interested in what I'm doing and, will invite me. I was in, Australia in June. I've, usually have overseas trips, and it's fun to travel, but it's also fun to meet with other people, in the field doing science, and just to be able to kind of maintain those intellectual interactions and kind of learn new stuff. For me, I'll say that's maybe the most fun, whether it's, the high point, but, that's something that's you maybe don't think of when you start out, but it's, been really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what more the Advanced Therapy Center continues to produce and influence, especially for Alpha Clinic and Therapeutics here at the Sanford Stem Cell Institute.
Yeah.
And the Advanced Cell Therapy Lab and the work that you're doing there with Holly Young, who's already been on the podcast. So
Yep.
thank you for letting us borrow her for the time. I appreciate it.
For sure. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and hopefully people can connect to our Sanford Stem Cell Institute and Advanced Therapy Center if they're interested in, potentially working with us.
Absolutely. And folks that are interested can go to stemcells.ucsd.edu and look for Advanced Therapy Center under centers, or you can go directly to actl.ucsd.edu and learn a little bit more about the work that Dan Kaufman and his group are doing. Dan, thank you very much for being on the Regen podcast today.
Sure. Sounds good.
Appreciate it.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks.